name is Nate, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the Plane Tbm900 aircraft. This is an aircraft that was that I found on the X Aviation website. The aircraft is absolutely amazing. This is a payware aircraft, by the way. This is not a freeware, but it looks absolutely amazing. One thing I absolutely love about this airplane is the fact it is very customizable, and just about every single system on this airplane is modeled. Everything to the maintenance menus, to the inside of the airplane, to the glass cockpit, to the behavior of the airplane. If you don't start it correctly, you can have a hot start situation where you can have fire coming out of the tailpipes in the front here. It is just an absolutely amazing airplane, and just it's an absolute it's a little bit of a learning curve if you're used to flying jets like 7.3s and 7.4s and the flight factor 7.5s and 7.6s even. So it does have a little bit of a learning curve to it if you have not flown prop-driven aircraft before, or a high-performance aircraft. But one thing that really makes it nice about this airplane and learning high performance is the fact that the prop condition levers, the power levers, and all the levers basically to control the prop and your black, blue, and red prop levers, everything's integrated into one power lever, and it is really amazing. So it basically, the system is designed to keep the prop and to keep the start functions from getting into configurations that are dangerous or that would cause damage to the airplane. So I'm just going to kind of go over some systems real quick, just to kind of give you guys an overview of how this works. If you have this airplane and you are getting frustrated with hot starts, I'm going to kind of do a short tutorial on how to get this airplane started up, and then we'll do some flying around St. Martin. So the first thing I'm going to kind of go over is the overhead panel here. So you've got it, and there's really not a whole lot to it. There's you have your external lights, your interior lights, your electrical power, and I'll kind of go over all this setup here in a second. Your engine start switches and your fuel switches here, and your autopilot trim switch, and your ELT at the end there. So it's very basic in a way. There's not like, you know, like you look up at the overhead panel on like a 757 and it's like just switches everywhere, and you're like, ah, how do I learn all this? The TBM is very simplified. So first thing I'm going to go over is the crash bar, which is this little barber pole shaped doohickey here. We're going to take that, we're going to lift that up, and that is going to supply minimal power to the aircraft. This is going to basically start up the pilot flight, or the primary flight display for, PFD. I got that right. Primary flight display for the pilot. It is going to power just essential systems on board to minimize the battery drain. So we're going to hear some caution and warnings come up here. I'm going to silence those, and we'll continue on with the startup.
Aural warning, okay.
So it's going to give me a couple different system checks there. It's going to, I think the HTOS system's going to do a check here when I turn on the battery. But so I'm going to turn on the battery here. We're going to hear the fuel pump. A couple caution warnings come up here. I'm going to turn off the boost pump here for the moment. God, that's very, very loud.
TOS system test. Okay.
Okay, so there's the TOS system test. Kind of going into the MFD. Here is the here's the caution auroral system, which basically shows all of the different caution and warnings for the airplane, configuration-wise. But we'll go into the startup. So something that I'm going to cover real quick, a lesson learned. If your battery is low, this plane will not start. You will have to go into the maintenance menu, which is the maintenance hanger here. Come over to electrics. You'll have to turn off the crash bar, go into the access, and then recharge your battery. Or you can replace the battery however you want to do it. So I'm now on battery power. So what I'm going to do is come over here to the fuel panel. I'm going to make sure that boost pumps are turned on. And I'm going to make sure that fuel selector switch is set to manual. Okay, I'm going to come over here to the starter switch and I'm going to lift this to the auto position for 2 seconds. I'm going to release. I'm going to come down here to my other panel and I'm going to look for the NG. We're at 15%. I'm going to come down here to the power level and move it to low idle. By moving it to low idle, you're going to see your internal turbine temperatures climb up to about 700 degrees Celsius. And it kind of went into the yellow there. That's not necessarily a good thing. You don't want to hit those red marks, but because the NG rose very quickly, you want to hit your low idle right at about 13%. So, maintenance hanger. Let's see if we did any damage to the... Oh, we can't open the engine right now. But when we get back to the ramp, we'll see what that happens. But typically, like I said, you want to make sure your NG is right at 13% there before you go to that low idle. If you wait till your NG is a little bit later, you're going to see those ITTs climb up into the red mark, which is not a good thing. It can exceed into the red, and if it goes into the red, chances are you're going to have an engine fire, and that's not good. So, so right now we're engine stable at low idle. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the H lever to flight idle. We're going to move it up and over to the flight idle position. You have a low idle and you have a high idle on the right side of the H there. Power lever is divided into 3 sections. On the left side, you have power, you have taxi, and you have reverse. You're going to notice that if you're using a throttle quadrant, I'm moving the throttle all the way back to the rear position. It will not move past flight idle. This has bumper stops in the power handle to keep it from being moved into an unsafe position. So if you want to taxi, there's a setting. I'm actually going to show you the lever here. There is a small little release lever that you can lift. This is actually mapped, and I believe the function, it's called beta or engine reverse toggle, and that will actually lift that. So if I move my throttle quadrant, you'll see there on the bottom right side of the screen there where it's locked in at flight idle. If I press my beta switch, which I have mapped, it will move it back into the taxi range, so I can move it back into taxi, or I can drag it even further back into the reverser area, which we are not going to use because we don't want to kick up excessive dust and debris and have it get sucked into the engine intake and then another fire. So I'm going to leave it on taxi for the moment. I'm going to turn the generator on the overhead panel. So we have generator power. Move the taxi lights to taxi there. Turn on my pulse lights here. The ignition switch is going to stay in automatic. The starter is off. We're going to come over here to auxiliary boost pumps, turn that off. We're going to move our fuel selector switch to automatic. And we are going to turn on the autopilot trim switch. And essentially at this point, long as the engine has not caught fire due to a hot start, then you're actually ready to taxi at this point. I'll come over here to the menu, remove the chocks. As soon as I take off the parking brake, we should be ready to go. Alright. So get myself situated here. And the parking brake knob here, you want to make sure that when you're setting your parking brake, that you're pushing your toe brakes all the way in and then turning the knob to the on position. To release the parking brake, simply turn the knob off. Now we're moving. So it really does not take any major engine power to get this aircraft moving. This is a very high performance airplane. It really does not take a whole lot of power to get this thing going. And we're taxiing right into a turn ourselves around here. So like I said, we're down here at Princess Juliana Airport at St. Martin. We're gonna kind of just do, I'm just gonna show you guys some basic maneuvers in the airplane, different systems, how to set up the autopilot, that kind of thing, and then we'll do some landings and kind of show off the airplane a little bit. So I actually had someone ask me a while back, why does, and I think my wife asked me this question, she goes, we were watching a video of an airplane on an approach, and it had the ditching lights like you see on a freight train when it's coming up to a crossing, and it's got the alternating strobes going back and forth. And she goes, well, why do airplanes have that? Well, to be honest, at the time I didn't know, so that led me to Google, which I got on the Google machine and looked it up, and apparently airplanes have this feature because birds do not like flashing lights. And it is a I guess in a figure you could call it like those deer whistles, like you put it on, like you put on your car, and they emit a certain sound. It's supposed to keep deer away from your car, or keep deer from running out in your car. Kind of the same thing with the flashing lights. The birds don't like flashing lights, so it keeps the birds away from the airplane. I have no idea how effective it actually is, but that is a feature that I think some of the newer 737, some of the newer Boeing aircraft have as well, and definitely a feature on the TBM900 here. So another cool thing I want to point out too, and this is on the PD or the primary flight displays here. Is this aircraft is fully equipped with synthetic vision. Now, for those of you that do not know what synthetic vision is, it is a feature that basically takes almost like a Google Maps view of the outside and basically projects it onto your flight display. So in very low visibility conditions, I can actually land on the runway and be able to see the runway on my primary flight display versus having just this display and using the instrument landing system. You'll still use the instrument landing system in synthetic vision, but you can still, it just gives you a little bit better visuals of what the outside looks like. So here we are lined up on runway 10. We are at taxi still, so I'm going to move it into flight idle. And I'm going to, real quick here, make sure that my flaps are set to flight. Or, I'm sorry, to takeoff. And you'll notice too when, you know how if you've ever flown a Cherokee before, you know the burden in the Cherokee, you've got to sit there and actually flip this switch back and forth between the left and the right tank because it does not have the ability to draw from both tanks. What makes this airplane nice is it has an automatic, and that's what this switch is up here, the automatic fuel selector. It will switch between both tanks. So that way you don't actually have to sit there and monitor each tank and then have to, you know, flip the switch yourself. There's motors and computers in there that actually do it for you, which makes it nice. So the flaps are set. We're going to go ahead and apply power. Now the key thing to applying power in this aircraft, especially when you're doing takeoff, this does not have a FADEC system, which means you are responsible for how much torque is on this prop during takeoff. You do not want to put it into the red area. You want to make sure that you're staying within limitations. There's 100 knots. It's kind of fighting me a little bit of a crosswind, I think. And I got 140. We're going to come back on the yoke, and we are up. And we got a positive rate. We're going to come gear up.
Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead.
So the MCAS system's talking to me a little bit. Or not the MCAS, the CAS system.
Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead.
This does not
Terrain
have
ahead.
MCAS.
Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Pull up. Terrain ahead.
Yes, I'm pulling
Terrain
up,
ahead.
sweetheart. It's what the Air Force pilots call bitching Betty. So, yeah, that's one of the challenges on that runway 10 takeoff at St. Martin. You have the mountains that are right in front of you there, and you got to make sure that you clear those. So, I am using a SATEC Pro flight yoke, which I'm going to be very happy to get rid of here in the future, as I will be migrating to the Yoko Yoke Plus from Virtual Fly. I've heard very good things about it. Definitely look forward to getting that yoke and trying that out. It's got Hall sensors in it. It's not sticky like the SATEC yoke is. It's a very, very high fidelity flight yoke, and definitely makes for easier control. So coming up on 3,000 feet, which I had set in the autopilot. I'm gonna kind of move that up so we don't get any more warnings. We'll just fly visual, and we're kind of getting into the clouds here, so I need to make sure that I'm descending, staying at least 1,000 feet above, or 1,000 feet below, or away from any other clouds here. So I'm gonna pull this back to
Landing gear.
it's not happy because I'm bringing it all the way back to flight idle. It will sit there and warn you about landing gear. Come on, keep descending, keep descending, keep descending. And that clicking sound you're hearing is me moving the trim switch. There we go. Now we're below the clouds. Now we are VFR, and we're legal at this point. So even though technically I could fly this plane, flying it into the clouds. One thing you are going to notice on this airplane is it has a very strong tendency to roll to the left. Reason being is because, especially in high-performance aircraft, like if you've ever flown a Mooney before, you will, the propeller, if you're sitting in the cockpit facing forward, the propeller turns clockwise. So with the prop turning clockwise, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's known as P factor. And what it does is it has a natural tendency to turn the airplane to the opposite direction that in which the prop is spinning. So you notice if I take my hands off the controls, we automatically start banking to the left there. So one feature that is in this airplane that kind of helps mitigate that some is the Aileron trim rocker switches. You can use those to kind of trim off the aileron a little bit to keep the airplane, or to mitigate some of the P factor that comes with this airplane. So I'm going to introduce just a little bit more torque here, give us a little bit more power. I'm going to kind of start turning towards St. Martin. I'm going to do a flyover of the airfield at like 1,200 feet, which will be, I think that's like traffic pattern altitude. We're pretty close to sea level, so. And this really is an amazing airplane. Oh, look at that! One thing I didn't do when I started up here was turn my bleed air switches on. And my AC switch. So basically what your bleed air switch does is it takes bleed air from the engine and pressurizes the airplane. If we had climbed up through 14,000 feet with that bleed air switch off, we would end up in a situation where the airplane wouldn't pressurize and essentially bad things happen. So we want to make sure that the airplane, if we go past 14,000, that the airplane's pressurized. So I'm just going to kind of... I'm going to set the autopilot too, so we can kind of get our hands off the controls here for a moment. And just kind of fly the airplane. So I'm going to switch to an outside view real quick, kind of give you guys a view of the scenery. The sounds are just amazing too. The level of sound that level of detail they put into the sound package and everything is just absolutely amazing. Coming up real soon, actually, I'm going to be getting the part 2 for the St. Martin scenery to include St. Bart's, and I don't know if you've ever been on YouTube and you've ever seen that video of that twin-engine aircraft going to the end of the runway and then it hits beach and then it crashes into the ocean there. That's St. Bart's Airport. They don't have any. I don't think there's any turboprops that actually land there. Any heavies like Dash 800s or whatever, but definitely no jets would be able to land there. The runway being too short. So. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get set up for an approach on, I'm going to set up on the opposite of runway 10 there, which I'm going to switch over to heading. I'm going to adjust my altitude. I'm going to hold at 2,000 feet. So I'm going to switch it over to vertical speed, increase the vertical speed, and do about 1,500 feet per minute on the climb and level off at 2,000 feet. A little bit more torque in there. the south here. 10, so 0927 would be the opposite of that. So it'd be runway 28 that we're going to be lining up on. Right now I'm just kind of letting the autopilot fly the airplane. All I'm doing is making some adjustments to the heading selection and while I've got the autopilot engaged, I'll show you guys the back of the cabin here. Kind of give you guys a look here. It is just absolutely beautifully modeled. The door on this side does open up. The emergency exit, unfortunately, is not modeled. That door does not open. Ooh, let me show you guys the oxygen mask thing. That's pretty cool. So let's say we're in a situation now where the aircraft has gone through a depressurization. We can come over here, reach up for our oxygen mask, actually pull it out of its harness, and then we can place the oxygen mask over the mannequin face there, which simulates you wearing the oxygen mask at this point. And then to remove it, simply click on the mannequin head there, and then just click and drag away, and it will automatically reholster the oxygen mask there. I thought this was pretty cool. I pulled down on that, and I'm like, no way. You just click it, drag it right on the face, and then oxygen mask applied, come back down to the mannequin face, drag it up and away, and it holsters it back. Now, X-Plane actually does model effects of hypoxia. If you go up and you cannot talk today. If you depressurize your airplane, your screen will actually start to go black. It'll start getting a little bit darker until it's completely black. It simulates you blacking out, so it kind of gives you. And it really depends on the what altitude that you're at, how fast that actually happens. So it's really cool that it simulates that. You know, just to kind of practice, you know, donning O2 masks and stuff like that. But yeah, this is just absolutely amazing airplane. And like I said, everything is modeled here. You can go under the system and take a look at, I guess this is the fuel, which I got 39 gallons left in the tanks here. I gotta get some fuel here at some point. Go over your electrical systems, your navigation maps, you even have a spot here for checklists. You can run through checklists, you can check each item, go to the next checklist. It really is an absolutely amazing airplane. So I'm going to turn off here to a heading of 09. I'm going to try to get off to 090 here. start slowing the airplane down a little bit, bringing the torque back. Now the thing with these high performance airplanes is the prop speed will remain the same. You actually don't hear the engines kind of like die down and start spooling down when you pull back on the power lever. The props actually, the pitch of the blades actually change to how much air that it's biting into, and that's what creates the thrust on these airplanes. So once we get down into the wide arc there, we are going to start introducing some flaps. And we're going to set up for our visual on runway 9 at St. Martin there. So there we are. We are in the wide arc. I'm going to disengage the autopilot. And
Landing gear.
it's going to start yelling at me about the landing gear, so I'm going to drop that.
Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear.
Landing gear is down and locked. We can actually click a button here to check down and locked or to test the landing gear lights. Because we are descending past 2,000 feet or below 2,000 feet, it gives us a little bit of a warning there saying, hey, you're departing your altitude you had plugged into your autopilot. Alright, so we'll make our turn to the left here to line up on runway 09. And I'm going to keep my airspeed right at around ballpark of like 90 to 100 knots. I'm the only one on the airplane. I don't have any extra cargo or anything like that, so weight is simulated in this depending on how much cargo you have or how many passengers you're carrying, that kind of thing. So all of that is indeed simulated. So.
Airspeed.
And it's going to yell at me a little bit here because my airspeed is kind of low just because the airplane being so light, so. And I do kind of have a nose-up tendency here. Trying to trim off some of that back pressure. Yeah, still a little high. And this is cool too, this scenery package, if you've ever seen the YouTube videos of the people standing on the beach and getting blown off the beach when the big 7.4s or the larger turbine aircraft, they they just blow the people right off the beach when they go to take off power. You can actually see the people standing on the beach in this scenery. It actually modeled some people standing on the beach there. We'll just come right over the top. So I have a little difficulty controlling this airplane just because of the type of yoke that I have. It is not a very good one, but it works. So get a little low there, a little bit low for comfort. Come right over the top there. There's the synthetic vision coming in there. I've got the runway, and I'm gonna pull it back to idle. Well, kind of coming off the runway a little bit there, kind of crab into it a little bit. There we go. Alright, there we go, successful landing. And I'm gonna go ahead and apply the reversers. Put it back into taxi range, and there we go. Beautifully done. I was a little bit more right of the center line than I wanted to be, but you know, that was just a little bit of the wind fighting me, I guess. So I'm gonna get lined up here, get ready to go. Get taxied up here, and that's the other thing I can't quite figure out. Why I'm getting like a yawing tendency on the rudder pedals there. It wants to pull to the left for some reason. But like I said, I do apologize if this video is a little crude and I don't cover the checklists or anything. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a look at the new airplane. Kind of give you a brief synopsis of what the systems are. But if you're looking for a high-level simulation and you're looking for a good general aviation aircraft, this is, in my opinion, the best buy, the absolute best. So I'm going to move the throttle over to low idle. Set my parking brake. Then cut off. Battery source off. Generator off. Crash bar off. There we have it. And the doors do operate as well. You also have a tablet here in the door. I haven't really looked at that and discovered what that's all about yet, but there's a tablet in there. I guess it goes on the, I don't know if it goes on the, there it is. Yeah, so there's I guess there's a tablet that goes on the yoke there. And it kind of provides, I guess, a backup for the instruments, but we'll come out here, just kind of do a look around on the airplane. Absolutely beautiful. And the door does open. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful. Alright, so that is the TBM900. I hope you all enjoyed. If you guys have any questions about the airplane, be sure to hit me up down in the comment section or shoot me a message. This is the Spirit of Simulation, signing off until next time.